Hello, lords and ladies. Welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. Growing up as a kid, I was really fond of two cartoons. One, you probably already know by watching this channel, and if you don't, it's Scooby-Doo. And two, Courage the Cowardly Dog. The latter of which would come on early in the mornings and spook me before I went off to school. So, of course, when news reached me of a Scooby-Doo and Courage crossover movie, I was cautiously excited. It's actually a bit weird how long it took for Warner Brothers to stick two of its most cowardly dogs together for the first time, at least officially. You'd think it would be a match made in heaven. But hey, it's here now, or, well, it came out a while ago, I'm just slow to cover it. As you can easily guess, the movie centers on these two cartoon icons coming face to face and trying to survive an onslaught of spooky stuff in the bizarre town of Nowhere. Specifically, giant cicadas and a weird manor belonging to the mayor of Nowhere. I certainly didn't vote for him. The movie starts off with a bit of an odd segment where Scoob and Shaggy take selfies with the crook in a clown mask, but it turns out to not be some jarring inclusion of modern culture, and is this them following the advice of their self-help audiobook thing. Then Scooby hears an odd sound, does some incredibly weird dance moves, and runs off, leaving the gang to abandon the dude they had just captured and go chase him down. One, that seems a bit out of character for the gang to let the bad guy go. Two, somehow Scooby makes it to Nowhere really quick. Obviously, it is a cartoon and whatnot, but I found it odd how relatively close Nowhere is to wherever the characters were. Like, you see some trees and greenery bleeding into the desert landscape in this shot, when in the show there would be nothing there at all. Am I nitpicking? Probably. It's not a serious deal in the grand scheme of things, but it does irk me a little bit. The meetup of the two franchises' lead characters is aptly awkward and wholesome at the same time. Scooby and Courage are really two peas in a pod, and I'm glad they're finally paired together. Muriel is as clueless as ever, constantly confusing the gang as riddle solvers instead of mystery solvers. And Eustace, voiced by Jeff Bergman, since the last two voice actors for the character unfortunately passed away in 2003 and 2016, is as cantankerous as ever, clearly not enjoying having some kooky teens in his home. Bergman does a decent enough job as the character, though when he first speaks, it is a little off-sounding to the ear. There's also a later scene of his, which we'll get to momentarily. It's quite a doozy. When you have two shows crossing over, you typically try to represent both shows' styles, not just artistically, but in how a scene goes down, and how it's written. So, for example, despite the fact Scooby and Courage are having one hell of a time with a drain creature, even the Mystery Gang doesn't seem to notice. I think that's kind of a classic Courage staple, if I recall. It's been a while. It does come off really weird, though, considering they're both screaming less than 5 feet from the others, but it still is funny. On the flip side, the manor setting involved a fair bit of the Scooby style, I guess, what with the investigation, the chase scenes, etc. Though it still obviously had a touch of the bizarre you've come to love Courage for, such as the mayor's mannerisms and the decorations. The movie really does balance and show off the best of both series, in my opinion. Not ever seen as a 10, but you can't help but love the stuff that the characters get up to, like when the characters are being transformed in this particular scene, and Daphne basically becomes 8-bit Daphne. That's not something you see all the time with Scooby-Doo, outside of mirrors that show their 1960s incarnations. Speaking of that one scene, something I was worried immensely about this movie was how it might once again downplay the supernatural elements like Return to Zombie Island did, or Curse of the 13th Ghost, where Velma more or less gaslights everyone. Courage is always dealing with real monsters, aliens, and mythical beings. Would this movie also throw in some human in a mask so that Velma can write everything off yet again? Honestly, the more the film continued, the less likely it seemed that there's any possible explanation the gang could come up with for the events happening to them. Like, they legit fall to pieces or get turned into weird animals at one point. And to the movie's credit, they almost get through the entire film before the gang try to paint everything as the machinations of a guy in a rubber mask. Even if the culprits were humans and not the particular characters they're revealed to be near the end, really cool inclusion there, that doesn't account for anything else that happened in the movie. Additionally, they have 2 talking dogs with them, but apparently a talking cat and duck, that's impossible. I know it's a staple of the series, but you can't have them admit the supernatural stuff was real just this once. Again, am I nitpicking? Probably, but it's about my only biggest critique of Scooby Meets Courage. Besides, this scene.
I'm a well-to-do dude with a 1% freaking nightmare. Like a bank tycoon or the president, say if I care.
Yes, that is Eustace rapping. It comes out of nowhere, is never mentioned again, and is fairly uncharacteristic of Bags, in my opinion. It's not a horrible song, it's kind of catchy in its own way, but it really doesn't add much nor make any sense to include. Maybe as an extra on the DVD, in the style of those old Cartoon Network bumper advertisements they used to run, but just not as part of the film itself. The other part of the movie that doesn't fit similarly is Scooby, Shaggy, and Courage laughing from a fart joke. I could be completely off, but it really doesn't seem to fit either show's humor, so I'm not quite sure why the writers felt the need to make such a crude joke. It's more in line with the live-action Scooby-Doo movie than most of his animated appearances. Luckily, I still found the movie to be fun to watch in general, despite the inclusion of stuff that fell out of place. Some of my favorites were the manor, with almost any scene including the butler and maid. The chase music in the underground scenes was oddly good too, and really fit the Courage side of things. And interestingly enough, we're given an explanation for the crazy things that have happened in nowhere. The meteor. I'm not sure if this is the first time there's been a rationale for the supernatural in his show, but it was cool to get an answer after all these years. Given what happens to the meteor afterwards, I'm curious if things will become normal in the town, or if it's far too late for that. And before I forget to mention it, there's even a nice little message in the movie. Nothing you've never heard before, but it really fits in with Courage being there. Basically, Shaggy's self-help audiobook points out that courage isn't the absence of fear, but to continue on despite your fear. It's the kind of message you'd find in Courage's series, so it's pretty appropriate here. And is a nice way to wrap up the Courage the Cowardly Dog series all these years later, in my opinion. Scooby-Doo Meets Courage the Cowardly Dog is a solid crossover that brings together elements from both shows while doing them justice for the most part, even if some scenes or jokes don't come across very well. It's funny, it's creepy, it's wholesome, it's almost a love letter to Courage. Plus, it's almost certainly better than Return to Zombie Island. What more could you ask for? Hey, if you've seen the movie, please chime in with your thoughts on it below. What's your favorite scene? Let me know, I'd be interested to hear. And for more reviews like this one, consider subscribing and becoming a member for early access to videos. Thanks for watching, and take care.